Hello everyone. Today we will continue the topic of conditionals with another possible part of the if statement, else if clause. You use else if when you want for the if statement to check for two different conditions with two separate pieces of code to execute. So as you can see, there is a first if condition with condition 1, and there's a second one, else if condition 2, and then if this condition is true, this code executes, and if this condition is true, this code executes. You could of course use two separate if statements. However, there is a difference. So as you see on the left is the if with an else if clause, and on the right there are two if statements. If we check for two conditions in separate if statements, they both have a chance to be true. Therefore, both pieces of code will execute. So we're here in the right, if this one is true, and if this one is also true, both pieces of code will execute. However, in case of an if with an else if clause, the else if clause will only be checked if the if condition is not true. Therefore, only one of the two blocks of code will execute. There may be multiple else if clause in one else if statement. Like here is an extra one. So, in short, either this piece of code will execute or this piece of code will execute. Because if this condition is true, only this piece of code will execute, and this will not even be checked, right? So if this one is true, then this one is only checked in case this one is false. So if this one is false, then this one is checked, and if it's true, this one will execute. If this one is also false, then it goes to the next else if, and it checks for this one, and if that one is true, this will execute. So basically it goes down into the different clauses only in case that the condition is not true. So if as soon as one of these is true, all the others will stop executing. Just the code which is relevant will execute, and it will skip everything else. Over here, I'll say once again, this may be true, this may be true, and this may be true. And all three pieces of code will execute because they are all checked independently. We can also use else clause after an else if statement. So to sum up the structure, the if statement starts with an initial condition check. So there's an if in the very beginning, and there's an initial condition check. There is relevant code which will execute in case this condition is true. Afterwards, there is an else if clause. There might be multiple else if clause, or maybe even none. Each of them will check their own condition in sequence, and then execute the code if the condition is true. In case all of the if and else if, if the single if condition and multiple else if conditions are all false, only then the else condition will execute. And that is the last clause. Everything that does not get find an appropriate condition which is true over here gets to this part of code. So this part of code executes if all the previous conditions are all false. However, this is only inside a single if condition statement. So if there are two separate if condition statements, they will be dealt with separately. There is one more concept I wish to talk to you about today. Nested if statements. These are if statements inside other if statements, in short. Let's take this example. We have a variable age somewhere in the code, and we want to check if the said variable is equal to 18. Afterwards, if it is equal to 18, we want to check if another variable called money is equal to 200. And only if that is true, execute a certain piece of code. So first we want to check if age is equal to 18. Then if it is equal to 18, we check if money is equal to 200. And if that is true, this piece of code will be executed. This is achieved in this piece of code. The code inside the curly brackets of the inner if condition will execute only in that case. So as you see, here is the bracket starts, and here the bracket ends. This imaginary line over here is just the notation we use. The thing is, the last one that is opened is closed first. So this one is opened, this one is opened, and now since this one was opened, the next time something is closed, this is the one that's affected. So this is one code block, and this entire thing is another code block. So basically this if statement is inside the code block of this if statement. In Java, we say that this is the outer if statement and this one is the inner one. Well, that's pretty logical, I guess. Another thing worth noting is how there is an indentation before some of the code lines. You see over here, there are some spaces over here, which makes it much easier actually, because we see that this is part of the outer if statement and this is inside the if statement. This technique is usually used by programmers to denote what is inside a certain statement's block of code and what is outside. So if you do not do this, there will be no error. However, this is a very good practice. If you work with other people or even work alone, it will be easier to read. The if condition, the opening and the closing curly brackets over here, if condition, opening and closing, are all outside of the code block. And they are not indented, therefore. And all these, as you can see, they're indented and they're all inside the code block. Thank you once again for watching another episode of this series. Please be sure to leave some feedback and possibly suggestions about what you would like to see in here in the future. And have a nice day.